Hello everyone, this is Cavell, and today I'm going to teach you how to use the quadratic formula. And before we even learn how to use the quadratic formula, we must know what the quadratic formula is. So, what is the quadratic formula? The quadratic formula is x equals to negative b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4 AC, and this is all being divided by 2a. So now you're probably asking me, hey Cavell, I see a, b's, and c's, and x's. What are they supposed to mean? So, those a, b, and c are actually coefficients of the quadratic equation. So, a quadratic equation, what does that look like? That is in the form of ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So before you use the quadratic formula, you must convert the quadratic equation into an ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0 format. So now you're probably asking me, okay, I see the a, b, and c. Yes, so the a, b, and c are actually coefficients of the quadratic equation. One thing you do have to take into account is that a can never be 0. Why? You're probably asking. Because if a is 0, this is no longer a quadratic equation. If a is 0, this term ax squared becomes 0, right? Because 0 times anything is just 0, so 0 times x squared is just 0. And if a is 0, this just becomes a linear equation, which would just be bx plus c equals 0. So remember, a cannot be 0. So now before you start using the quadratic formula, I advise my students to first write down what the coefficients are. So for example, if we have 3x squared minus 5x plus 3 equals 0, the coefficients I would write down are a is equal to 3. Now here's a little bit tricky part. You see the minus 5x, but I'm telling you to put it into a plus bx form. So to make things easier, you could think of minus 5x as the same thing as saying plus minus 5x. So as you can see, the coefficient would be negative 5. So b would be negative 5. C would just be 3. Now we must use the quadratic formula. So we begin by writing x equals to negative b, which is negative of negative 5, plus or minus, very important, b squared, which is minus 5, squared, minus 4. What is a? A is 3. What is c? C is also 3. All over 2a, which is also 3, once again. So one thing you should take into consideration is when you're using the quadratic formula, you should always put everything in parentheses, right? Because it'll make things a lot more organized, and it'll definitely save you in the long run when you go back and check. So let's simplify this quadratic formula we've done here. So negative times negative 5 is just 5 plus or minus b squared, or negative 5 squared, which is 25. So negative 5 times negative 5 is 25, minus 4 times 3 times 3. So 3 times 3 is 9. 9 times 4 is 36. There is a subtraction sign, so this would just be minus 36. This is all being divided by 2a, which is 2 times 3, which is just 6. So now we need to simplify this even more. So in the numerator we have 5 plus or minus square root of 25 minus 36, which is minus 11, all over 6. So since we have a negative number inside the radical, that means the answer we're going to get is going to be complex. So since there's a negative and a negative 11, we must factor that out to an I. So our final answer will be 5 plus or minus I radical 11 all over 6. Now, with any quadratic equation, you should have two answers. Why? Because of this plus or minus. So in general, you can leave the answer like this. X equals to 5 plus or minus I times square root of 11 all over 6. Or you could write it out completely different, in which you'll write out both answers. So you can write down x equals 2. So we could do 5 plus square root of, so don't forget the I, 11 over 6. That's your first answer. That's the plus part. Now let's do the minus part. We'll have 5 minus I square root of 11 all over 6. Now, these two ways of writing the answer are exactly the same. Don't be scared. Don't be terrified, because the plus or minus simply means 5 plus I radical 11 or 5 minus I radical 11, either or, and you'll have to write out both since there are two answers. And that is all for today. Thank you. Bye bye.